خدمتك زوجتك صدقة. When you serve your wife, you will get the reward as if you're given a generous charity. That is the Prophet of Islam, and that is Robert Spencer.
Okay, thank you, Moustafa. Robert, you've got 3 minutes for your portion of Crossfire. We've reset the clock, and you may start right now.
Thank you. Actually, there's no difference in what I said from one part to the other about the testimony of women. Actually, women's testimony is not allowed in crimes of zina, even if she is the victim. He exposed nothing except his own lies, because, as a matter of fact, it has been established even by Muslim women's rights groups, like the wonderful group in Malaysia, Sisters in Islam, that most of the women who are in prison in countries like Pakistan and others, where zina has traditionally been understood as being in the realm of hudud punishments, in the realm of Islamic law, rather than in the civil law, that most of the women in prison are there because they were victims of rape, but their testimony is inadmissible, and they don't have the witnesses to prove that they were raped, because Islamic law stipulates in chapter 24, verse 4 and 24, verse 13 of the Quran, that in such crimes there has to be four male Muslim witnesses who saw the act. And that's obviously something that is essentially impossible to establish. And as for wife beating, you notice once again that he's admitting that a man can legitimately and lawfully beat his disobedient wife. And that's really all I'm interested in establishing, because that is a howling inequality. And what we have before us here is the question of whether women are treated equally in Islam or not. But any thing that can be beaten like a pack animal when disobedient is not equal. And here again, he does not treat the hadith that I have brought forward, that is from Sahih Muslim and is thus considered to be authentic by Muslims, in which Aisha says that Muhammad, and I quote, struck me on the chest which caused me pain. And that is not something that is a symbolic or light thing. When it involves pain, it involves pain. And obviously beating a wife or scourging or chastising, as these various Muslim translations have it, is something that's going to cause pain. It's not something that is some sort of a love tap, and that's a ridiculous apologetic notion that's designed to fool Westerners into thinking that there's no problem here. But unfortunately there is, and we haven't even dealt with so much more that renders women unequal, like polygamy. That a man can have 4 wives and as many sexual slaves as he wishes out of the captives his right hand possesses. That is something that, unfortunately for Mr. Zayed, has been recently reaffirmed by several Islamic clerics, that there ought to be the revival of sexual slavery of non-believing women who are captured and made into prostitutes or sexual slaves by their Muslim captors. This has been recently reaffirmed, actually by a female legislator in Kuwait and by another Islamic cleric. And so he's pulling the wool over our eyes, but I am not going to allow it to happen.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Okay, we at this point will give each of you 6 minutes, starting with Moustafa, to make your closing comments, your closing statement for the evening. Again, 6 minutes, and then we'll be going to break. And so at this point, we just want to remind everybody we'll be taking your calls after this next break. But at this point, we're going to take the next 6 minutes times 2, 12 minutes. Moustafa, you are up first. Thank you.
All right. Again, look at the progression of Mr. Spencer withdrawing from the false claims that he used in the beginning. It was superior at one part of the verse, and then the other verse was supposed to now means superior, and I proved that neither speak about man or women, so that's ended. What I mentioned is not the authenticity of the 2 quotations that he did, but a part of his deceptions, that when the women asked him why the majority are of women from hellfire, he's talked about because they're ungrateful to their husbands who gave him everything, and just for one mistake that they make, they claim that he gave us nothing. Ungratefulness. The other hadith is a totally different hadith and a totally different incident. The incident of Sayyida Aisha, I challenged him to bring me the incident of by which she's supposed to be disobedient, and then Prophet Muhammad had beaten her. Sayyida Aisha was the greatest probably wife of Prophet Muhammad. She was never disobedient to him, and she said dafa'ani, he pushed me. She didn't say struck me, and she was not disobedient. And I'm going to publish that hadith tomorrow. Again, push me is not struck me, and she was never disobedient. Again, please, Mr. Spencer, read my lips. I never said beat a disobedient wife. I said pair the hadith of the Prophet of Islam, not some Pakistani or Malaysian rural areas in some tent village, that if she commits an apparent crime, Can you read my lips if you cannot hear me, please? I never said disobedient. I said the crime of nushuz, an apparent crime. If you can understand English anymore. The other thing is, when we go to the witnesses again, the sandbox of Mr. Spencer, when he tries to take the poorest countries, the most war-stricken countries, and try to generalize them over Islam, his favorite sandbox, maybe Afghanistan or Afghanistan. He bring me an enterprise in Pakistan where somebody said this, or some female or a clerk in Spain said something. Well, if it violates what in the Quran and the model behavior of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, then these people have committed a crime and violated Islamic law. And for the 100th times, you cannot judge Islam by the criminal of the fuse. You can judge people by Islamic law. And again, what matters here, and what I want to explain to the viewers, it's not the what, it's the why. Why Mr. Spencer is doing this? Why Mr. Spencer and his likes are constant inciters of hatreds between Americans? Because that's what he gets paid for. If you look at what was published recently in the past 3 years, $920,000, the majority of them through the Freedom Organization, Freedom Center Organization, was funneled to him through a Zionist extremist by the name of Joyce Kimmick. And that is not published in a Muslim magazine. It is published in the Jerusalem Post of his friends, Israel. It's a business. He makes a lot of money out of that, the same way that Walid Shabat was exposed in CNN. And the biggest problem of that is not how much money he makes or the hatred that he incites amongst people. Look at what happened in Norway. The terrorist in Norway who killed 100 innocent people and injured more, that person quoted Robert Spencer in his manifesto over 64 times and referenced jihadwatch.org over 130 times. And I couldn't care less of the authenticity of what he says. It's not a freedom of speech. It's fabrications, it's lies, it's inciting hatred. And to the simple-minded people, like the insane terrorists in Norway, the result can be innocent people killed, mostly young kids in a summer camp. And we would be mistaken if we allow that venom to spread of the lies and fabrications and the discrimination against Muslim in America, where you can buy a machine gun that you can kill a dinosaur with just by showing your photo ID in some states. So Mr. Spencer makes a living inciting hatred amongst people. And if I was any of the people of Norway, I would have sued Mr. Spencer as an instigator of that crime of hatred, because that's the ideology that he makes. The followers of Mr. Spencer are not people who read from themselves or can look at translations and objectively understand what is being thrown at them. It's the simple-minded, hatred and entertainment seekers, people who want to polarize and hate something just to give a meaning of the life, or just bring resentment against someone out there. And if we help that, then one of us or someone who's related to us, Muslim or non-Muslim, any American of any creed, would be the victim soon. The blood of these innocent people in Norway is in Mr. Spencer's hand, and God forbid there are going to be other crimes of that hatred and incitement. Why Mr. Spencer is telling us all that, and he's supposed to enlighten us about Islam, and he has no proper education in Islam. He does not speak the language. He has not major references. And the matter of fact, I quote him in his book saying something in one page that, oh, Muhammad evidently believed the rumors about his wife. The following page, he says, he brings an authentic hadith that Muhammad says, I never believed anything like that. It's copy and paste, things that are laughable. He claims that dhimmi in Arabic means ugly. Manzil, where the stopping location is now a house, and all these laughable things. But the problem is his followers are simple-minded, they don't understand, and the hatred is like we're spilling gasoline above our population, waiting for the next spark of the next terrorist to hurt us all. Why the hatred? The blood is on your hand, Mr. Spencer. Drug dealers, no drugs kill, but the money is good. And the money that you make is good from the worst enemies of Islam, the extreme right-wing Zionists of Israel, as published in Jerusalem Post. I don't think the money is worth it. And any decent American, Muslim or non-Muslim, should be alert to the venom and the hatred that is being spread all over the world about Muslims, and specifically in America. Muslims make 3% of the population, maybe 25% of the doctors that heals all Americans are Muslims. Over 25% of the hate crimes against Americans are committed against American Muslims, and the instigator is right there. Mr. Spencer incites hatred for a living. His lies are exposed, and I put him in the book, The Lies About Muhammad. Most of the women that accept Islam in my class, most of the people are from the women gender, highly educated women, and Islam is the fastest growing religion
Moustafa.
in the world.
Thank you, Moustafa. That was your last 6 minutes of your closing statement. Now, Robert, you have 6 minutes to make your closing statement, then we'll be going to break.
Okay, I'm going to have to respond to some of this, although you'll note that the topic is not the evils of Robert Spencer. The topic is, does Islam treat women equally and consider them equal? and that has been amply established that they do not, even by Moustafa Zayed. But the character assassination and viciousness of this man is clear now. It's really breathtaking how he will stoop to this kind of defamation and demonization. And it's interesting because he is claiming that I engage in hate speech, but he is obviously trying to get people to hate me. And so I would wonder if he thinks that if those of Muslims who give me daily death threats, if those Muslims actually succeed in killing me, will he consider that he himself has blood on his hands for trying to demonize me and get people to hate me tonight? That would be a very interesting thing. But whether they kill me or not, I'm going to keep telling the truth up until I die. And the fact is that I had nothing to do with the Norway killing any more than the Beatles have to do with Charles Manson's killings. The man cited me, he cited Barack Obama, he cited John Locke, Thomas Jefferson, Charles Darwin. He plagiarized the Unabomber, but nobody is saying that radical environmentalists are to blame for this. He started plotting violence in the 1990s before I had published anything about Islam except in a college setting, which he never could not have seen. He was already plotting violence long before I was ever doing anything publicly in this line. And in regard to incitement, I would challenge the Imam Moustafa Zayed or anyone to actually produce a single genuine example of my telling anybody to commit violence against anyone or to hate anyone. Obviously, he wants you to hate me, but all I'm doing here is telling the truth. And so it's very interesting that he once again is proving the adage, as St. Paul said, have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? He cannot stand the truth. He keeps lying about chapter 4, verse 34, which I explained that he was taking issue with the part of the verse that is acknowledged to mean that men are the protectors and sustainers of women, then completely ignoring and obfuscating the following part, which is translated by Muslims as, but because Allah has made the one to excel the other, or in Dawood's translation, to be superior to the other. He keeps trying to make a big deal out of these hadith that I quoted being different, but the fact is that they are both considered authentic, all considered authentic. He outright lies about this hadith in which Muhammad says, in which Aisha says, and I quote, he struck me on the chest, which caused me pain, and then said, did you think that Allah and his apostle would deal unjustly with you? That's Muhammad saying, Muhammad striking her on the chest, and Aisha saying that Muhammad struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. That is the translation of Sahih Muslim 2127 by Abdul Hamid Siddiqui, who is himself a Muslim. And so I would wonder if Mr. Zayed thinks that I somehow got the ear of Abdul Hamid Siddiqui and deceived him into mistranslating this passage, which he is now lying about. But the fact is that all the lies and hate are not coming from me. They're coming from Moustafa Zayed and people like him. And that is because they cannot stand to have the truth about Islam told. The fact is that Islam institutionalizes discrimination against women. It institutionalizes the commodification of women. And anything he says about me is not going to change that because I did not originate it. The fact is that polygamy is mandated in the Quran. He never mentioned anything about that because he can't deny it. The fact is that the Quran also stipulates that a man can divorce his wife by saying, talaq, I divorce you 3 times. And if he does it the 3rd time, then she is divorced definitively, has to marry another man and consummate that marriage and be divorced by him before she can go back to her first husband if he chooses to have her back. That's a kind of a monstrous and barbaric law, but that is part of Islamic law. And it certainly has nothing to do with equality of rights for women. He didn't say anything about the sex slaves, because he cannot deny, as I said, that Islamic imams, not Spencer, but Islamic imams themselves have called for the revival of this practice, which is Quranic. The Quran in chapter 4, verse 3 says that a man can marry up to 4 wives and then have captives that his right hand possesses, that is, sex slaves. And there is a traditional legal category for sexual slavery in Islam, while a woman has to cover